Hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk about Algorand, why its price action is a little bit deceptive in terms of the actual value of the project, but also why some of these dynamics suggest that Algorand as a long-term hold might not be as great of an option as it originally appears. So that's a lot. Let's go ahead and break it down. So if we look at the Algorand's price over time, we can see that more recently it's been quite disappointing, right? I think anybody who's been holding Algorand, especially anyone acquiring up in this kind of general area up here, has been very disappointed with how far it's gone. You know, from the all-time high here at the very top of that wick down to the bottom, we're down 92.5%. And Algorand's price is actually all the way, it's round tripped all the way back down to these lows back here in November of 2020, and really just kind of this overall low range that Algorand has seen, we're kind of already back there, which has been quite disappointing for a lot of people. But what's interesting is when you look at the Algorand market cap, this tells a very different story than what price is telling. So market cap, as a reminder, is calculated by price times circulating supply. And so when we look at market cap, we can see that actually Algorand is more or less kind of trading just below kind of the summer 21 levels, kind of back over here where it was, back in February 21, but nowhere near these lower levels where if we look at price, the current price is way back down to these levels it had been all the way back here in 2019, 2020. Market cap, not anywhere close. Market cap is currently sitting at 1.7 billion, way above, the back here, for example, 150-ish million market cap that it was back here. So what the heck's going on, right? Why is it that market cap is telling such a different story than price? Because price says that, Algorand has basically just been going sideways its entire life with just some short-term, with just some volatility in here. Whereas the market cap is saying that Algorand has been kind of in an uptrend, more or less, and is kind of holding this consolidation range. Well, the answer comes down to that circulating supply number, right? Because we know that price has been falling off a cliff all the way back down here. So the only thing that would be different then is that there must just be a heck of a lot more circulating supply out here. So even with price being this low, when you multiply price by that larger circulating supply, you get up to this higher number, this 1.7 billion, instead of, the 150 million or whatever it was back here. And that's exactly what's going on with Algorand. So over here on CoinMarketCap, they have an article that talks about Algorand's tokenomics. And I wanted to look at this chart here specifically because it tells, I think, an interesting story. So essentially what this is showing is the distribution of Algorand across time. So kind of there was the initial supply, and then that, is going to grow up until the max supply, which is at 10 billion. And essentially it shows how that Algorand is going to get distributed out into the ecosystem. And so what you can see is that any bar that's kind of the same size throughout is not changing. That means there's no new supply going to that source. So like the Algorand Inc., for example, they got allocated a big chunk at the beginning, but then that chunk isn't increasing over time. But if we look at this red bar, the early backer and nodes bars here, these red ones, you can see this is growing in share through this time, which means that new tokens are being unlocked and allocated to those groups relative to earlier on. Same thing with, for example, the ecosystem support, that's the orange up through here, and participation incentives as well, which is up through here. And so, the short answer is this is why we're seeing that discrepancy between price and market cap, because you can see we're kind of right now in this kind of big uptrend in this kind of S-shaped curve here. Starts out slow, ramps up, then tapers off towards the ultimate max. We're in the acceleration phase through here, right? 2022, 2023, 2024. We're in this acceleration phase before we start to get to that plateau. So there's a ton of inflation basically going on with Algorand right now. A lot of new supply, new algo just hitting the market, being available for trade. And that's probably what's led price to fall so much, because you're probably seeing is that as more algo get created, there's more selling pressure. People are dumping onto the market. So you can have a lot of people dumping, moving price down, but that move down in price is not enough to offset that inflation to bring us all the way back down here in market cap terms, back to where we were, last time we saw these price levels. And when I look at these tokenomics, the thing that I think is probably maybe where most of the selling pressure is coming from, this is just speculation, I don't really know, but if I had to guess, early backers are always a group that's known to dump on retail when they get a chance. So people who are early investors in a project, they probably got in at a pretty favorable price. So therefore, when their tokens get unlocked, usually their tokens are unlocking at a price that's higher than the original backers would have paid for those algo, and therefore they're just going to dump it on the market and take whatever profit that is. And so I would suspect that that's one group that's doing it. Ecosystem support, if that's being used to support different innovation or creation on the protocol, then that probably also is getting dumped as well to create, finances, money to support those different projects. So that's probably also another source of this. And generally speaking, just across some of these, the more supply gets unlocked, the more dumping is likely. And so that's probably what we end up seeing here in this discrepancy. So there are kind of two takeaways that we can make from this. So the first one we can say is that it does still look like Algorand has not capitulated to as much of a degree in terms of market cap as it has price. And this is where price is a little bit deceptive here, right? Because price is all the way round tripped. But in terms of actual overall valuation, at this level of circulating supply, it seems like people are actually valuing Algorand overall more now than they did back here. So basically, there's been absorption of that inflation to a point that's enough to keep it at a value that's higher than what would have happened if people would have just allowed things to dump kind of naturally along with inflation back down to these levels. Basically, if value of algo hadn't changed from here to here, you'd expect market cap to be at the same point as that new inflation, that new supply would have hit the market. We haven't seen that yet. So this is suggesting a more bullish outlook kind of just from a structure perspective if you look at market cap versus price. Essentially, there's enough demand to absorb that new supply and keep the valuation significantly higher than back here, even if price can't stay higher than it is back here. So that's the kind of the more bullish look at this, is that algo is more valued as a network now, and so people are able to absorb that additional supply, even though price has fallen as that massive number of algo have hit the market. But then the more bearish thing about this is that this might say that just from a price perspective, which is really ultimately what impacts the investor, right? So how much should I pay for it and what's the price going to be in the future? This kind of suggests a bearish outlook, at least for the next couple of years for algo. And the reason I say this, if we just look at this distribution, as I mentioned, we're still years away before this tapers off, this kind of explosion in new supply. And you can really see that this early backer group, they're going to taper out somewhere around 2025 is where they're going to kind of hit their ceiling and then just kind of level off and no new supply is going to go to them. But what I would expect is that through this bear market especially, that lasts through next year or even into 2024, I think algo is just going to naturally bleed out because that new supply is going to hit the market and there's no massive explosion of demand to really kind of catch that falling knife, right? In a bull market, you can kind of get away with having extreme inflation because there's just so much demand that the unlock of new supply isn't fast enough to really totally suppress the price from going on these big runs. But in a bear market, when there isn't that huge hype, that huge speculative demand for something like algo, it's very plausible that algo just kind of continues at best go sideways or actually maybe even bleed out further. And so it's one of those things where algo's price chart might actually start looking quite bearish going into this bear market. It's possible that we just kind of, more or less track down, maybe even going down and testing some of these lows eventually before we can go into our next bull market. Now, those are just, of course, lines that I'm drawing on the chart shouldn't be taken seriously, but that kind of idea where it's very plausible we just continue to bleed out, where if demand remains constant but then increased supply keeps hitting the market, that'll lead to lower prices. Now, that might not lead the market cap to go all the way down to the same levels, to revisit some of these low levels, but it could lead price to do that. And if you're someone who's investing in algo, that's ultimately what you care about. So obviously none of this is financial advice. You should do what you think is best. But when I look at this, I see algo as being, at least until some of these tokenomics have played out, I see algo as more being a thing to get into at the beginning of a bull market or kind of earlier on in the upswing, but not to just hold through a bear market, because you're just going to get debased, basically. There's going to be so much inflation in Algorand that you're going to just bleed, even if you're staking, that's not going to offset it. The inflation here is faster than you're going to be making back in the staking rewards. It's just not looking super great for this particular bear market. Now, the good news is that if we can weather this bear market, if algo can go into having the next bull market, by the time we hit the bear market after that, we'd probably be somewhere over in this range where inflation is going to be not a super big issue. And there, it might look more favorable as a long-term hold. But really, with an asset, if there's going to be a lot of inflation going on, then holding it long term looks less and less attractive. Basically, those are assets where kind of more strategic positioning oftentimes more advantageous. Whereas things with more slow or even deflationary tokenomics can start to look more attractive. That's one of the things with Bitcoin that's kind of nice. Where even though there's inflation, it's constantly decreasing every 4 years. Or Ethereum is kind of currently playing around with becoming deflationary because of the burn mechanism and some of those things. Should make some of those assets a little bit more reasonable for long-term holds from this perspective. Whereas Algo right now, just because of this tokenomics, is a little bit concerning. So again, not financial advice. You do what you think is best. And of course, if you think there's some massive demand driver for Algo that's going to show up, that would change the equation. I'm just not really there yet. What I'm seeing is I'm seeing that we're in a bear market. I think we're going to be in a bear market for a while longer. And therefore, this kind of continued inflation, continued debasement of Algo because of its tokenomics really does concern me from a long-term holding perspective. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like and follow us on Twitter. A lot of updates, indicators, and more over there.